Good evening. Good evening. Good evening. Thank you for joining Metropolitan Community College's Women's History Month celebration. My name is Dr. Cynthia Gooch Grayson, and it is my honor as the Associate Vice President for Access, Opportunity, and TRIO programs to welcome you to this evening's event. We are very appreciative of those joining us on Zoom and in person this evening. Tonight, we will learn and hear from an exceptional speaker, Dr. Joy Kinard. It's funny that you hear about 6 degrees of separation, and I don't know about you all in our listening audience, but I have some best friends in my mind, and one of my best friends is Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune. And I was doing some research for my Girl Scout troop on Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune on the internet. And lo and behold, who do I find but other than Dr. Joy Kinard, who I already knew. So imagine that, that surprise that I had. So consequently, we invited her here to come and to present to us here at Metropolitan Community College. The preservation of Black history and its importance in telling America's full story is in the DNA of our guest speaker for tonight. The Washington, D.C. native has a PhD in United States history with a minor in public history and Caribbean studies. And she's paid tribute to her father in her first book, The Man, the Movement, the Museum, The Journey of John R. Kinard as the first African-American director of a Smithsonian Institution museum, published in 2017. Her father's social and economic activism took him to Africa, to establishing the Anacostia Neighborhood Museum in Washington, D.C., that eventually told the history of its Black community, to directing the nation's museum through the Smithsonian. In keeping with her father's passion, Dr. Kinard's 20-plus year National Park Service career reflects her abiding interest in the preservation and advancement of stories pertaining to African American and American heritage. She is currently the chair of the Division of Political History at the National Museum of American History, and previously was the superintendent of the Central Alabama Civil Rights Sites, which include the Tuskegee Airmen National Historic Site, the Tuskegee Institute National Historic Site, and the Selma to Montgomery National Historic Trail. Her leadership roles in the National Park Service include being the first superintendent of the Charles Young Buffalo Soldiers National Monument for 5 years. She spent 4 years as the National Capital Parks East Central District Manager, managing historic places such as the Mary McLeod Bethune Council House, National Historic Site, the National Archives for Black Women's History, the Carter G. Woodson Home, National Historic Site, Langston Golf Course, James Creek Marina, and Buzzard Point Marina, all parts of Anacostia Park. Her management portfolio and assignments include Acting Chief of Interpretation, Education, and Cultural Resource Manager at the Martin Luther King Jr. National Historic Site, Oxen Hill Farm, and Wolf Trap National Park for the Performing Arts. She also has served as park ranger at various sites in Virginia and Maryland, educating visitors on the stories of prominent figures in American history, including George Washington, Frederick Douglass, and Robert E. Lee. She has been featured in the HGTV documentary, African American Historic Homes, produced by High Noon Entertainment, where the focus was the home of Frederick Douglass, and was recently featured on C-SPAN to observe Women's Equality Day by the Sewell Seawall Belmont House and Museum. That's the where I saw her on C-SPAN. And I said, oh my gosh, I know that voice. I know that face. As a scholar of African American history and culture, Dr. Kinard contributed to the African American National Biography Encyclopedia, and she taught and has taught university courses in history. Dr. Kinard has studied race relations abroad in Paris, London, and St. Catharines, Canada, as part of a Howard University cultural study tour. MCC family, guests, family, and friends, I present to you Dr. Joy Kinard, who will share Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune, a legacy of infinite work. Dr. Kinard.
Good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank you all for having me here. I almost didn't think I would make it because my flight got delayed today from Washington, D.C. I flew into Omaha, and I'm so happy that I touched down here in time for this presentation. And so I first want to thank all of you all for being here, either online or present here face to face. I want you all to know that taking time out to celebrate Women's History Month is something we need to do. And I'm glad that you all are here helping us celebrate. I want to thank Dr. Cynthia Gooch Grayson for inviting me here to come and share with you all some of my thoughts and philosophies. And I also want to thank Sarah Watson for making it a seamless experience and pleasant process working through me getting here. And so I just wanted to make sure that I thank them. I am happy to be here. Outside of the Smithsonian and the National Park Service, the other job that I had was teaching at a university and a community college. And what I realized is I had so much fun at the community college because the students were a lot more grounded and knew where they wanted to go and be, and had so many experiences that they had such confidence. And so it just warms my heart to be back in this space. I also wanted to tell you that when I was a professor at the University of District of Columbia, I taught history. And I tried my best to make certain that people could use history as a tool. History is a tool in your toolbox to help make impact and impact change and affect change. And I think we have seen evidence of that throughout our time here and even recent experiences in the national news. And we cannot forget the women that are making the impact. Women like Maya Angelou, Shirley Chisholm, Michelle Obama, Rosa Parks, Mary McLeod Bethune, Mary Church Terrell, Gloria Steinem, Zora Neale Hurston, Eleanor Roosevelt, Magdalena Walker, Anna J. Cooper, Nannie Helen Burroughs, Oprah Winfrey, Amelia Earhart, Clara Barton, Sojourner Truth, Princess Diana, Ruth Bader Greensburg, and so many others who have truly done so much to help change the human condition. These women must be celebrated, but we cannot stop there. We must celebrate the everyday woman, our mothers, our grandmothers who have helped us make a way and have a better life, our sisters and friends and teachers and administrators and faculty here, the leadership of this university, even someone like a bank teller and a bus driver, pilots and chefs. We have to give them a pat on the back and a hand clap for all of the things that they've done. In 1926, Mary McLeod Bethune has this to say: God, give us girls The time demands strong girls, good girls, true girls, girls who the world's gold cannot buy, girls with willing hands, girls who possess opinions and a will, girls who honor and will not lie, girls who can stand before a motley crowd and down its treacherous flatteries without winking, tall girls, sun-crowned girls, girls whose voices cry aloud and gives us a challenge to the whole world's thinking. Do you think Mrs. Bethune's prayer was answered? I want to talk about this today. This quote of Mary McLeod Bethune and the life she lived that left a legacy of infinite worth is what I came to share with you today. A little bit about Mary McLeod Bethune. She was born in Maysville, South Carolina, right after emancipation. She was born to parents who had been enslaved. They were sharecroppers. Of course, cotton was their main crop. And one day she went with her father to the weigh in his cotton. And she noticed, because she had been going to school, that he was getting cheated out of his cotton. And so when her father went up to weigh it, and she was courageous enough to tell the white men who he was selling his cotton to that, no, you are weighing it incorrectly. You need to pay my father this much. And when all of the other sharecroppers heard her stand up to the man and get her father his just due, she understood then that she needed to be an advocate. She needed to educate people, because education, the fact that her father really didn't know how to read or how he was going to improve his condition by his income in this situation, was only because his daughter was being educated. And so she knew then that she wanted to be a teacher. She wanted to teach the masses how to change their condition. And so that's what she did. She grew up in Maysville, South Carolina. She went to Moody Bible Institute after she had finished all of the schools that she went to. She went to Barber Scotia College in Concord, North Carolina. Then she went to Moody Bible Institute in Chicago. And then she started her own school. She could not be a missionary because Moody did not send Black women during that time to do mission work. But what she didn't know is that the AME Church and the AME Zion Church had been sending Black women to Africa, and she could have gone, but she didn't know. And so her mission work needed to be here in the South, in America. And so she went to Augusta, Georgia, where she went to the Haynes Institute, met her husband there. She perfected her teaching abilities, and then she started her own school in Daytona Beach, Florida. We know it now as Bethune-Cookman University. Her life's work, yes, was an educator. She was able to influence so many people. She was in the Black cabinet of advisors to President Roosevelt. She was an advisor to Harry S. Truman. She had been a very good friend of Eleanor Roosevelt and was able to leverage that relationship to make other things happen, like the Tuskegee Airmen serving in World War II, like Marian Anderson being able to sing on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. And so Mrs. Bethune did a lot of work behind the scenes that a lot of people did not know. But it's amazing because she laid the foundation like so many others. And it's time that, again, we recognize her and other women this month. One thing that I will tell you is that because of Mrs. Bethune's amazing legacy, we have so many things behind that people have felt moved by to honor her and her legacy. And so we mentioned the school, the university, the council house in Washington, D.C., which I'm going to explain briefly to you today. Her retreat, which was put on the National Register for Historic Places in Daytona Beach on the campus of her school. That's where she passed away. She's buried there at the university as well. She started an organization called the National Council of Negro Women. I know you all have heard of Dorothy Height. She was a very well-known president of the National Council of Negro Women and took it on to grow even beyond Mrs. Bethune's expectations. And they were very involved in the civil rights movement in the 60s and were known as a Big Six organization like SNCC and SCLC. And so one thing also that you may not know is that there are a lot of schools, streets, and highways named after Mary McLeod Bethune. And there is a statue in the US Capitol that honors her that went up in 2020. It is a beautiful statue that replaced a Confederate statue of a Confederate soldier from Florida. And so there were a number of congressional leaders in Florida who wanted to change this, pull down the statue representing the state of Florida in the US Capitol. And they did that. And a charge was led by members of the community in Florida to have a statue commissioned to honor Mary McLeod Bethune. And so recently that was put in the US Capitol. But prior to that statue, there was another statue, the first statue of an African American on the memorial lineup in Washington, D.C., in Lincoln Park, is the Mary McLeod Bethune statue. And this was an amazing feat because it's a presidential memorial. It honors President Lincoln. They had to turn his statue around and face hers. They had to do so many things to honor the legacy of enslavement, which his statue represented, and then her statue, which was after enslavement, someone who did so many things. So it was really, it's a message in the park. And when you go there and see these two statues across from one another, you just get an awesome feeling. It's an awesome feeling about legacy. And at the base of that statue is a snippet of the Proverbs 31 scripture, "Let her works praise her," inscripted in the statue. And so if you're ever in Washington on Capitol Hill, you will see that. One thing that I'm very proud of when I worked at the Mary McLeod Bethune Council House National Historic Site is the National Museum of African American History and Culture was going up. And they had done so much research on how they were going to be interpreting Black women. And they actually wanted to look at different museums around the country and see how they could work with them on the exhibitions. And so they came to us, Michelle Gates Marisi, who's one of the curators at the National Museum of African American History and Culture. They came to us to kind of talk through how would we encapsulate a portion of the council house in the exhibitions in this vast, beautiful, amazing museum. And what we decided was to have the conference room table that Mrs. Bethune had so many meetings around and to reconfigure it into a replica and put it in the National Museum of African American History and Culture. We set it up like the archives that Mrs. Bethune started when she was in this home for the National Council of Negro Women. In addition to that, we were able to get Bethune-Cookman College to donate some of her clothing to round out the exhibition. And then we were able to get the National Council of Negro Women and Alexis Herman and the Dorothy Height Foundation to have some of Dorothy Height's hats to round out the whole exhibit. And so if you ever go to the National Museum of African American History and Culture, it's the hottest ticket in town in DC, especially one of the Smithsonian's. Of course, I don't work there. I work across the street at the National Museum of American History, which is also the hottest ticket in town. But I will say that, you know, and speaking of Mrs. Bethune, we actually really don't have any of her collections yet at the National Museum of American History, but there is a story being told there. But we do talk about Black education in some way at the American History Museum. And so I just wanted to share with you guys, you know, as we look at this quote again from Mary McLeod Bethune, I want you to think about the work we do and the work we still need to do when it comes to voting rights. And this area still being a complex issue. Education and cultural race theory still being a complex issue. Affirmative action in higher education. Again, we're just trying to change the human condition, you know, with people who aren't able to have resources. And even redlining is at an all-time high in our poor communities. And so as you matriculate through Metropolitan Community College, I want you to really think about Mrs. Bethune and others who just want to change the human condition. So let me show my slides. I want to just share with you all some of the slides here. Let me go back. So if you ever get to Washington and you go downtown, there is a part of Washington, D.C. called Logan Circle. Logan Circle used to be a thriving Black community, but it is a thriving downtown community now. There are a lot of businesses there. It's very busy during the day. And Mrs. Bethune's home looks like a palace, okay? She was able to get it purchased by Marshall Fields. He actually gave her the money to purchase this brownstone, this 15-room home in Washington, D.C., when she was doing a lot of the work during the Roosevelt administration and the Truman administration. She needed somewhere to stay. She needed somewhere to have meetings, to convene the National Council of Negro Women. She wanted this organization to have a national base and center stage in Washington. And so she wanted to have this place where she could entertain, host people in a grand way. And so you're going to see one of the Rangers, Margaret, who was who has since passed away, but was a dear friend of mine and who was an awesome expert on Mary McLeod Bethune. And so you'll see her here in the parlor where people came to be greeted by Mrs. Bethune. And the chandelier in the middle of this room was given to Mrs. Bethune by Harry S. Truman. This came from the White House. Harry S. Truman, President Truman, yes. So we did so many things, and even today at the Bethune home, they still do so many things to honor her. And so we used to do so many events. Of course, you'll see Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton to the right here. To the left of her, you'll see Sonia Sanchez, who did a special commission poem to honor Mary McLeod Bethune. And then you'll see Dr. Bernice Johnson Regan, who was a longtime expert and started the Folklife Festival in Washington, D.C. with the Smithsonian. She also started Sweet Honey in the Rock, the well-known music group. And then, of course, Janet Halston Harris, who was the longtime DC historian. And so we have and continue to have, and of course, although I'm not with the Park Service anymore, I do support them in a large way. And so we often do still at the Bethune home. Some of the staff still has the junior ranger programs and youth programs. Here you're going to see one of the rangers with a young man learning how to document. We were trying to get young archivists created. We got a grant from the National Park Foundation through the America's Best Idea documentary that Kim Burns did. And this young man is learning about being an archivist and being a documentary, learning about documenting events. And so we had a number of these young people who were from African American, Native American, and Latin American groups in the Washington, D.C. area who wanted and cared about history. And so, of course, Gina Lewis is a professor of fine art at Bowie State University, and she had done some commission art as well with some of the young people, teaching them about quilts. And we actually, in the National Archives for Black Women's History, which is part of the Mary McLeod Bethune Council House, because she started in archives, Mrs. Bethune, we had Faith Ringo, some of her quilts. And so with her being such an awesome, well-known artist, we did a theme for our Junior Ranger program about quilts. And so we brought Gina in to kind of do a presentation about quilts and how they can be artistic. So Mrs. Bethune, she was an innovator. She was a leader. She had a legacy. And one thing that I do want to tell you is I close in a little bit. I do want to read portions of her last will and testament, which is an intangible look at what she leaves behind. She published it in Ebony magazine when she passed away. So she wrote it in time for her passing, just to show you how she was very thoughtful and wanting to leave something behind that people can take in their spirit. And John H. Johnson, who was the owner of Ebony magazine then, was a good friend of hers, and she also helped him too with his publication. And so here you're going to see Eleanor Roosevelt in front of the Bethune home when it opened. You're going to see, of course, her and her husband, who were very good friends of Mrs. Bethune. You're going to see the front of the council house. And then you're also going to see Mrs. Bethune's parents in the middle. And then the house she grew up in Maysville, South Carolina, which is that small cabin to the left. And so and I put it in this order for a reason. So you can see that small house right next, just opposed to the home on Logan Circle. You can see where she did not have limitations on who she would become one day and how she would think of herself. She didn't affix herself to those small walls, but she made sure that she lived outside of her condition. So the National Council of Negro Women was established in 1939. She did have an archives committee. This committee was headed by Sue Bailey Thurman, the wife of Howard Thurman, the very well-known theologian. They had an African-American women's journal that they published in the 1940s, which the Bethune home has the collection. And they did amazing, amazing things. They even did a cookbook that the National Council of Negro Women still publishes. And their first cookbook we have in the National Archives of Black Women's History, and it actually has historic recipes from famous people like George Washington Carver and Booker T. Washington and people like that. Mrs. Bethune was very involved in the education of African Americans, especially when Carter G. Woodson started the Association for the Study of Negro Life in History. And of course, now it's the Association for the Study of African American Life in History. And so his home was not very far from Mary McLeod Bethune's in Washington. They were very good friends. She served, she was the longest serving president of this organization he started in 1926. And in order for Mrs. Bethune to really look at her archives in a serious way, she enlisted Carter G. Woodson to help support the women. She has so many amazing people who thought then Black women's history was important. And so Carter G. Woodson was one of these people. And there is a brief story I'll tell about Mrs. Bethune trying to get a Liberty ship to be honored, to be named after Harriet Tubman during World War II. But they said there wasn't much scholarship done on Harriet Tubman. They didn't really know if she really did what they said she did back in the 40s. And so what ended up happening was Carter G. Woodson just happened to know this Jewish scholar who was writing a book about about Harriet Tubman. And since he owned his own publishing company, he published it. And so they were able to get the Liberty ship built, but they were able to cut folks off at the knees with this scholarship because Dr. Woodson had gone to Harvard University. He had journals, publications. He did an awesome work starting Black History Month, Carter G. Woodson. And so he had Mrs. Bethune's backing. So many people like him helped Mrs. Bethune move again, the human condition in a different way. So in the Bethune home, behind the house is a carriage house. Since I left the Bethune home, the archives have been moved to another location. But there was a time where we had the collection behind the home. And we had a very excellent relationship with Bethune-Cookman University. They still do. And we actually have microfilm that we share with the Mary McLeod Bethune Foundation. And that's what you'll see in this next slide here. These are records from the Mary McLeod Bethune Foundation and a microfiche that you can see. And this is actually the collections facility with the National Park Service, where a whole bunch of other parks have archives. And these are the archives for the National Council of Negro Women. When I was there, we were able to get I believe, about $7 million to process these collections. And we found so many amazing things. We actually found the pen that Dorothy Height got when she went for the signing of the Civil Rights Act. And this year we're celebrating the anniversary of the Civil Rights Act. And so this is the picture I wanted to show you of the beginning of the National Archives for Black Women's History. This is the research library that first spurred studying Black women at the National Council of Negro Women headquarters. And these were donated. They actually solicited for women to donate books and things that they thought that they should be collecting. And in this slide to the left there, you'll see a lot of those books in our rare book collection. So this is the last slide. I just wanted to let you know again all of the places that you will see Mrs. Bethune honored. Of course, at the Council House, the Legacy statue on Capitol Hill. There is, I forgot that there is a marker of her in Maysville, South Carolina. Of course, the retreat on the campus of Bethune-Cookman University, Bethune-Cookman University itself, Mrs. Bethune's statue in the U.S. Capitol, Barbara Scotia College, one of the schools she went to, and the Haynes Institute in Augusta, Georgia, where she met her husband and was inspired to start her own school with $1.50 in faith in God. As I close, I want to leave you, I won't read the whole thing, but I will, I hope that I will make sure you all get a copy of this legacy, Mrs. Bethune's last will and testament. And she has this to say: I leave you love. I leave you hope. I leave you the challenge of developing confidence in one another. I leave you a thirst for education. I leave you respect for the use of power. I leave you faith. I leave you racial dignity. I leave you a desire to live harmoniously with your fellow men. And finally, I leave you a responsibility to our young people. And she goes into detail, giving specific instructions in each one of these statements that have such power. And so I'm going to make sure that I get Sarah a copy of this. And if anyone who's here wants this copy I have, you are welcome to it. But I would love to take any questions now, if we have any. All right, I love questions. Bring it on. Did you need the mic? There's an extra one. Okay. There's an extra one. Here it is right here. I think you have to turn it on. Okay.
Let's give it up for Dr. Kinard.
Thank you. Thank you.
I have several from our online audience. And if anyone in the physical audience wants to ask questions, you may do so as well. The first question is, how has your life changed from the effect of learning about Mary McLeod Bethune?
Oh my goodness. Such a question. I was asked earlier, what was my favorite national park? And I've worked at 18. I have visited more around the country, been to Sequoia, been to Florida Everglades, been to, all the big ones. And the one that has so much meaning to me, the one that helps my back stiffen up and feel so proud to be an American, is the Mary McLeod Bethune Council House, because that congressional legislation is directly impacted to look and study Black women during a certain time from 1943, when she purchased the house, to 1966. And being at that home, so much happened to me. Good. I got my master's and PhD at Howard University when I was working a full-time job at the Bethune home. I was able to buy a house, save my money. My supervisor allowed me to work overtime at, you all have probably never heard of the Carter Barron, but it's a amphitheater in Rock Creek Park. They have, during the summer, so many summer concerts, and that's how I was able to save up for my house, to buy my grandmother's house for my uncle. And so I also will say that although she wasn't physically here for me to meet, I feel like I know her. You know, to read Eleanor Roosevelt's column in Jet magazine, If I Were a Negro. Eleanor Roosevelt actually had a column called If I Were a Negro. And she had a perspective because she put herself around people like Mary McLeod Bethune to get a perspective. And so being at the Bethune home taught me a lot about how you need to get out of your comfort zone, and you need to have other friends, have other experiences, and not get comfortable, because there's a crippling effect to that. I learned how to be a leader. Of course, I learned that in my home because my parents were awesome leaders. My father had done so much, and my mother is just the quintessential leader in so many ways. And so seeing her, my mother, be such an advocate for people, and do so much in the community, that was an awesome tool in my toolbox to have that. But Mrs. Bethune and other women like her really helped me to study other people who made an impact. Dorothy Height, you know, when you read her memoir, Open Wide the Freedom Gates, and you read about Wednesdays in Mississippi, and how every Wednesday in the month, she and these Jewish women went to Mississippi to help these poor women. Again, changing the human condition. You know, it's not about affirmative action. People just want to help change people's conditions. And so I think and I won't go into detail about other women that I learned about there at the Bethune home, but it definitely helped me think broader about the impacts that women can have if you put yourself in a position to have to be courageous and sacrifice your time to help others.
Thank you. I have a couple of comments too.
Oh, okay.
Mary McLeod is so inspiring.
She is.
I love your work.
Oh my goodness, thank you.
One question is, have you ever stayed in the home, like overnight?
No, but I would love to. If I was given that opportunity, I would do it.
Weren't the beds kind of
They were
like
small.
in Frederick Douglass' home?
Yes, they were
too.
small. Yeah, I would be scared I would break something if I stayed. I would have to get a sleeping bag.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would have to. But I really enjoy emergent experiences like that, and some museums are doing those.
Oh, really?
more. And so, so yeah, I wish that could happen. I wish that could happen, but no, I haven't done that.
So this question is, well, before I ask it, what year did she pass?
1955.
1955. So to our audience, she died in 1955, but I'm going to read the question as it was posed. How would you describe her presence? Because you perhaps felt it. Like, and then they say, like, what did people feel when she walked in the room?
Oh, you know what?
Was she tall, short?
She wasn't. She was short.
Okay.
One thing so first, Sarah, is it too late for them to hear her? I have a speech that okay, it's just that long. But if you can think of a queen, if you could think of someone with their head up all the time, shoulders back, dressed to the nines, fur shawl, jewelry, cane for swag, and the latest handbag and hat. That was Mrs. Bethune. She was feminine, although people would say that she was dark-skinned and she had a wide nose and she was heavy set. She had such confidence. And so when I have seen her in pictures, when I have seen her in video footage and clips, she has always had this queen-like persona. And being a full-figured woman myself, it is so awesome to see someone like her be so impactful and look good. And she looked good all the time. She knew how to write and was so eloquent when she spoke. That's why I hope we can play this speech, because I think okay, let me get I think he put the internet on here. It's on the internet. I don't know if we can get it, but is there another question? I can do two things.
Have you ever cooked any of the historical recipes?
Oh my goodness. Yes. I cooked Mary McLeod Bethune sweet potato pie.
Okay.
And it wasn't that good. My grandmother's was better. Okay. I'm sorry, Miss Bethune. I gotta keep it real.
Okay. Why do you think Mary generated so many people around her?
I think she had so many people around her because she helped people. And she wasn't afraid to call people to help other people. And they knew she wasn't calling for herself favors. I mean, she knew Charles Hamilton Houston. You know, he was right there in Washington, head of the Howard Law School, you know, when they were trying Brown versus Board of Education, building that case with Thurgood Marshall. I mean, who would have thought he would have been the first Black Supreme Court justice? You know? And so I think because people knew she was not selfish and she was always coming on behalf of someone else to really make a difference. She always wanted to make a difference. So we're going to the website here.
Can you snooze that
button? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, there you go. Okay.
And I want you all to go to their website so you all can see some other videos that they have. And let me tell you, most of the pictures you're going to see, these women could dress. I mean, they had beautiful shoes, beautiful, and I'm not into dressing. I don't want you all to get that impression. But sometimes as women, and we're talking about Women's History Month, you have to look respectable to get respect. And there have been a lot of conversations about what women wear. And sometimes we want respect, but we don't dress for respect, with the hoochie mama stuff and, the tight stuff and the pink hair. I mean, I think it looks good on some people, maybe Pink, the girl who is the singer. But sometimes it's not appropriate when you're trying to be a lawyer or when you're interested in having a job interview. I mean, we've just got to kind of, but you can always put a wig on. But anyway, okay, here it is right here. Okay. Was there another question?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
So this question is from one of our sorority sisters in Lincoln, Nebraska. Her last will and testament is truly profound.
It is.
Are there other writings by Mary McLeod Bethune we need to read?
Oh my goodness. Yes. I want you to go get Elaine Smith and Miss McCluskey's book. I forget her first name, but they wrote a book about Mary McLeod Bethune, and they gave some synopsises and interpretation of things, but in there, they were able to transcribe speeches.
Oh, Victoria Christopher Murray? That book? No, okay.
No, Elaine Smith is a Bethune scholar.
Okay,
She's
okay.
at Alabama State.
Okay.
But yeah, that book is the quintessential, because again, it transcribes speeches, minutes from meetings that had anecdotes of very important things, just all kinds of things in there. Yeah. That's where you can get it hands-on. But
Okay.
I would encourage you to go to the archives
Okay.
and touch her journal
Mm.
and touch letters she wrote. You can do that if you want, from Lincoln, Nebraska.
And I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge Antonio, who works in our college library here.
Yes. It's nice to have you here. Thanks for coming. And we also had a awesome relationship with Bethune-Cookman University. I mean, they have had amazing strides in digitizing their collections, and so have we. With technology, it's always something, but it's really helpful to be in Lincoln, Nebraska and be able to get something on a computer. So that's why I wanted to show them this. But
Okay.
go ahead with the question. Any more?
No, you answered it. She's looking it up right now, she said.
Okay.
But go ahead and
I
play.
hope they can hear this.
I can
Maybe
bring-
somebody on the Zoom can see if they can hear this. Can let us know. Okay.
May I thank you, my friends. Madam Chair.
This is Mrs. Bethune, the last speech she ever gave before she passed away.
Ladies and gentlemen, my beloved daughters, this is a very moving moment for me. This is not the time for me to speak. This is the time for me to sit in great humility, with my head bowed, my soul looking upward, with a gratitude to a God who has made it possible for one like me to stand before an audience like this, who come to pay homage to simple and ordinary human being who came from the depth of ignorance and poverty to a platform of service. service to mankind. It's moving. There's a spiritual undergirding I feel now that would say to me, be quiet and let the tears of gratitude flow, because you have been humble enough to permit a great God to take a life, reshape it and mold it and send it out to give out sunshine and love, and peace, and brotherhood among all men, regardless of their creed, their class, their color. I do want to thank you for all that you contributed to your presence. Yeah. Your endorsement of the efforts that we've been putting forth during all the years to lift mankind nearer God and to bring them closer together, to rid them of hate and to fill them with love, to take away the spirit of segregation, discrimination, and bind us together as one in a great democracy made by a great God. I'm very grateful to you.
Okay, I wanted to stop it there. I know we're kind of over time, but I want to encourage you to go to the website and listen to the rest of the speech. For those of you all on Zoom, the website is www.nps.gov/MAMC. And you could go to the photo media section on the website. And I can also get this to Sarah as well, along with the legacy, so she can make sure you all get access to it. Well, thank you so much. I have had so much fun. I hope I get invited back to Metropolitan Community College, because this has been a fabulous day. And I just want to thank you so much for inviting me. And yes, please. Oh.
What is the one biggest lesson you learned from working at the National Park Service?
Oh, the one biggest lesson I learned at the National Park Service. I learned that you have to go with the flow. There are times where people who know me know I want things my way. And most women do. You do know that, right? But I had to learn to go with the flow. Every day was an adventure. And I got to meet so many awesome people on a global level at the Park Service. The Park Service was good to me. I got to go to so many places that I never thought I would, and work in places I never thought I would, and live in places I never thought I would. Alabama, Ohio, Atlanta. So that's what it taught me, to go with the flow, because you never know what you'll learn. When you don't go with the flow, you have more restriction and you aren't able to receive blessings, and you aren't able to learn other skills, other skill sets, and you aren't able to really connect with people, visitors and staff and partners and congressional folks. So you've got to be able to go with the flow, and state elected officials as well. So that's my takeaway.
Well, thank you on behalf of the president, board
Oh,
governors,
thank you.
student staff at Metropolitan Community College, and we hope to invite you back.
Thank you.
We have
Yes.
comments from students.
Oh,
Thank you, Dr. Kinard. Wonderful presentation.
oh my goodness. Thank you. That speaks volumes.
For questions, Dr.
Mhm.
Kinard, I hope we have communicated our great appreciation for you being
Oh,
with us and
thank you.
enlightening us this evening. Do you have any final comments for the audience?
I just want you to know that I have enjoyed myself today. It is an honor to share my thoughts and for them to be received so well. And I just want to encourage you all to continue to learn, continue to give yourself grace, especially the ladies, because a lot of times we want to do and be so many things and we lose ourselves. So be kind to yourself. Have a spa day. Go get a Big Mac. Do you this month. Thank you.